Hello to the audience, and I thank you for joining us this evening. I know you could be doing a lot of other things with your time, but this is a topic, leadership, that is often very misunderstood. So what I'd like to do first and foremost is clarify the meaning. So Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines a leader as the office or position of a leader recently assumed the leadership of the company, or the capacity to lead a politician who lacks leadership, or the act or an instance of leading leadership molds individuals into a team. In a PMI article, Leadership When Management is Not Enough, there are 3 criteria for establishing what is leadership. First, leadership establishes direction, it aligns people, and a leader inspires and motivates. Next slide, please. What I want to say also, before actually looking at this slide, is that leadership is necessary when management is not enough. And there's a gentleman by the name of Peter Demov who wrote a PMI article. And that is what he was talking about. Leadership comes to the foreground when management is not enough. So I want to pose the question to the audience. When you think of a leader, who comes to mind? Some of us grew up having heroes. Others have people in their lives who inspired us, and we now aspire to be like them, maybe a role model. A leader can be from any walk of life, and you may be lucky enough to have several leaders who have influenced you. If that's the case, you may have noticed that while leaders typically possess similar characteristics or interpersonal skills, they may have significantly different styles. So what I want to share now is what leadership is not. It's not bossy. It's not dictatorial. Leaders do not have to have their own way. They are not non-collaborative. They do not listen. They don't shout orders where their team feels as if they have to fall in line and follow orders. And leaders are not short-term oriented. Leaders may be misunderstood because what leaders really do is they strategize, they set expectations, and they hold teams accountable. Leaders do not have to have their own way, but rather they look at the bigger picture and guide in navigating a larger landscape. Maybe they are listening but need to go in another direction to solve an organization's issue or complex problem. Maybe they are doing this when there's a recognition that workers have a blind spot. So leadership characteristics include being self-aware. Most leaders are passionate about what they do. They are emotionally intelligent, which is a social characteristic that most people are born with or not, but emotional intelligence can be enhanced through training. So if you're not one of those people who come by it naturally, not to worry, it's something that is a characteristic that can be learned and evolve and grown into. Leaders connect with people personally and they build relationships. They're resilient. So if they fail, it's that fail fast and fail early mentality. They'll just get up, shake the dust off of them and move on and experiment some more. They assess the corporate landscape, so they are socially and politically savvy. They are highly motivated people in general. They don't dictate, but they empower their teams. And they strive very much so to build an environment of trust and respect. So if an individual possesses leadership skills, they actually can lead from wherever they are in the organization. They don't have to be a top-level executive. Today, we need that. We have resources who are distracted, expectations that haven't been set, and accountability may not be what is needed to complete work deliverables or accomplish organizational goals. As a world culture, There is so much confusion, uncertainty, and we need leaders who will set direction and provide guidance. Next slide, please. So there really is an age-old debate between what is leadership versus what is management. And the difference is management is more tactical minded. It's a do as I say mentality, and it's more checklist or checkbox oriented. Managers typically look at repeatable tasks and for producing consistent results. They tend to be more bureaucratic. They resist change. They can be perceived as rigid because they're more black and white oriented. As I said, checkbox mentality. They are typically very detail oriented. They look at short-term goals as opposed to having that longer-term vision. They tend to be more compliance oriented. They might be labeled controlling, and they're predictable because it's about the repeatable patterns. Again, Peter Demov in his PMI article talked about management is mechanical by nature, typically lacking creativity with little room for innovation. So as opposed to leaders who can be curious and want to make a difference, leaders are change agents. What are the possibilities is the question that leaders ask. Next slide, please. So do we really need leaders? And why or why not? Leadership is mission critical to a project or an organization's success. Absolutely, take that to the bank. And the reason why is because leaders help to shape and create, they help to create and shape culture. They help to define strategy, that longer term vision, where other people might be, other resources may be focused on the day-to-day, the operational work. The leader is looking 3, 5, and 10 years out. How will the company continue to mature? What is my piece or my team's part of that, et cetera? They set organizational and team expectations. They identify goals, meaning establish success criteria. They hold resources accountable, which is key. They help navigate through complexity. They have the vision to do that. They typically are not detail oriented. They can have a pulse on something but know where to dive down to get the detail. They are able to work through information overload and synthesize data and provide direction as needed. Leaders typically are very adept at driving is the operative word, through ambiguity. So if something is squishy, it's not black and white, there's something vague and a complex problem needs to be solved, you're looking for leadership, not management, because leaders are not uncomfortable. In fact, the opposite is true. They are typically very comfortable in solving problems and connecting the dots. Next slide, please. Leaders also adjust and adapt. They're nimble. When you think of, if you're in technology and you think of an agile environment, a leader is what you're looking for. They are nimble, adjust rapidly, they're willing to be innovative and creative, but they also will put their feet to the fire to persevere through challenges and to motivate and be a cheerleader for their team, and they reward successes. So as General Colin Powell said, leadership is solving problems. The day soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day you have stopped leading them. They have either lost confidence that you can help or concluded you do not care. Either case is a failure of leadership. I think what I want to call out on this slide is the phrase concluded you do not care, because leaders are not aloof. Yes, many times leaders become CEOs and they're part of the executive leadership team, but don't think that that doesn't mean just because they are not in your day-to-day sphere of influence or interactions at work. If you work for a large company, leaders have gotten to the positions that they are because many of them are approachable, they become servant leaders, and they do care. And if they didn't care, they wouldn't be so passionate about the work and getting it done in a quality manner. Next slide, please. So why do we need leaders? Every individual, team, and organization is unique. They evolve over time. They all have different degrees of maturity levels, but typically follow a cyclical maturity model. And during the course of proceeding through a maturity models, individuals, teams, and organizations need different things at different times. Leaders tend to have the overall view of the landscape, so again, can help shepherd and provide guidance. They assess the big picture, so they're able to make recommendations for change. They usually are a bundle of energy. These are the type A personalities that you find in organizations, not always, but often. And they help to validate direction. Next slide, please. So from Scaled Agile, I found a chart for leaders provide the organization with patterns of expected behavior. And if you look at the top dark blue bar, a power-oriented organization is considered to be a pathological culture. That would be at the low level of the maturity spectrum. The middle level would be a bureaucratic culture, which is more rule-based. And the more advanced or mature culture would be considered generative culture or performance-oriented. So let's break that down a little bit. In a power-oriented culture, which would be more management-based, there could be low to little cooperation, a lot of blaming, maybe scapegoating. Resources shirk their responsibilities. Collaboration is not necessarily discouraged. In fact, it may be more of a silo-oriented environment. And innovation and creativity is crushed. It's really not in the organization's vocabulary. We move further along the maturity spectrum, and the bureaucratic culture is more rule-based, where there's moderate cooperation. Messengers may be neglected. Maybe there's selective listening based on agenda. Excuse me. There's a narrow set of responsibilities. So again, not that broader view of the world where there's room allowed for innovation and creativity. Collaboration may be tolerated, but not necessarily expected, and that's the bar to which resources are held. Failure leads to bad justice. You're going to get a ding for whatever went wrong. And innovation is perceived as leading to problems. But the difference between that and a performance-oriented or generative culture is a high degree of cooperation. Responsibilities are shared, collaboration is encouraged, teamwork usually is more of a well-functioning, high-performing team. Failure and failing fast leads to improvement, and innovation is implemented. So even just if you look at the contrast between the pathological culture, which is power-oriented, and the generative culture, which is performance-oriented, you see kind of a night and day difference. And for anyone who has worked in any kinds of organizations, any kind of these organizations, and we all have, you really, when you walk in the door and your approach to work is highly influenced by the culture that you're surrounded with. And it really is very different depending on which culture you're working within. Next slide, please. So many organizations go through transformational changes, and often organizations will go through multiple transformations. And the keys to leading successful change are aligned to leadership characteristics, meaning establishing a sense of urgency, creating a powerful guiding coalition to shepherd resources, where they are developing the vision and strategy, communicating that out, and communicating, and clarifying. Surveying employees for their areas of concern so that they can address them. Empowering employees for broad-based action. Generating short-term wins, because if you wait until the end goal, you may lose some resources along the way who are doubters. Consolidating gains and producing more wins, and anchoring new approaches in the culture. So it's kind of a spiraling forward approach where you get those small wins and you keep moving forward and influencing positive change. These, if you go back to the last slide, please. These bullet points were actually extracted from a book by John P. Cotter called Leading Change, and all of the characteristics aligning to successful change or transformational efforts align to leadership characteristics. Next slide, please. Does everybody want to be a leader? Do you want to take home that trophy? No, not everybody wants to be that leader. Not everyone wants to be the football quarterback or the class president or the company CEO, and that's okay. Leaders, we might not want to be Don Brady 2.0, right? But leaders in general have vision, they have ability, they have the will to make things happen. They use grit to work through adversity. They are typically very self-aware. They're willing to take the time to get to know others and to learn from others, the good things, and learn from watching others' mistakes. Mission critical is they take the time to actively listen, not just communicate a message out, but to actively listen to get the pulse on what is somebody trying to tell me. They'll clarify what they're hearing. And they will not only listen to verbal communication, but they will watch behavior, because it doesn't always mean that because somebody's saying something, their behavior follows. And then it takes patience, and they have the patience to try and try again. So here's the key word: is being a leader means being resilient. Okay, so are you taking one for the team, but getting back up and doing it again and again? Next slide, please. So what I want to comment on next, I found on LinkedIn recently. It was a study, a little excerpt that was put out by McKinsey & Company, a consulting company, and it's labeled Resilient Mindsets. And for someone, a leader who has a resilient mindset, the adjectives that are used to describe that are opportunity, curious, creative, agent, meaning change agent, abundance, exploration, and growth. If a person does not possess a resilient mindset, the words they use to describe a non-resilient mindset is protection, expert, reactive, victim, scarcity, certainty, and fixed. So a leader typically says, what are the possibilities and what is the bigger picture? I could make something great happen today. I'll ask lots of questions to learn more. I have plenty and I will share with others. And my plan is good, but I'm flexible and curious. So the question then is, does everyone need to be a leader? Does everyone want to be a leader? No. Does everyone need to be a leader? And that's a resounding no. Because often the responsibilities of a leader go above and beyond. You're working extra and long work hours. There's a lack of work-life balance. Extracurricular activities often align to work skills. So you're in your off hours, you're attending board meetings, association presentations, webinars. It's a commitment that few are willing to own. We don't need an organization of leaders. We need an employee population that is diversified with many experiences, many skill sets, and many, many, many different interests. Next slide, please. So leadership is often underutilized. As I mentioned before, all organizations need leaders. But are the right people in leadership positions? Just because you have a leadership title does not mean that you are actually a leader. How mature are your leaders on the leadership spectrum? Are they emotionally intelligent? Are they able to blend a strategic mindset with motivating a workforce? And if not, have they surrounded themselves with people who can drive solutions? There have been some studies done that for the skill sets that a project manager needs and the skill set that a CEO, Chief Executive Officer, possesses. And it's actually been stated that the next generation of CEOs will most likely come from the project management pool, because the tool chest and the skill sets that each of those different roles have are very similar. Next slide, please. So a fact, many corporations are overmanaged, but underled. I'm going to repeat that and just think to yourself, does this resonate for me in any company that I've ever worked in? Many corporations are overmanaged and underled. If so, this means that their ability to adapt to change is greatly diminished. It includes successful companies and companies of all sizes across industry sectors that talk about leadership, but maybe more have a management culture. Where there's a leadership gap, are universities are training? Do companies have succession plans? And is there an overall acknowledgement of leadership characteristics? Meaning, do we have talent assessments, and are we grooming our resources? Next slide, please. So how does leadership happen? There is no magic wand. Some individuals are skilled and they have training and experience. Some are by nature naturally leaders. Individuals who demonstrate resilience under pressure are not afraid to fail, and they're adept at recovering. They message out top down. They clarify. They repeat communications until the organization organically thinks and acts according to them. I worked for one CEO once who at every town hall said, assume good intent. And everyone working for that gentleman at the time, and that was 20 years ago, still uses that language in all of our new organizations. So just to repeat also, when individuals who demonstrate resilience under pressure, this means that our leaders are socially aware, which means they're emotionally intelligent. They usually have a very strong self-awareness, and they have a strong enough self-awareness that over time and with practice, they've become other aware, meaning they understand that there are different communication styles, different motivators, and different workplace behaviors, so that they can go into a meeting and identify if someone is operating, I guess, under their natural style, or maybe a backup style because they're under stress. Are they a high dominant person, or are they a more social person? Are they more analytical? And a leader can go into a room and typically read the audience and play to their strengths in order to influence an outcome. Next slide, please. So is everyone who says they're a leader? Absolutely not. What are their mores? What are their values? Have they earned, and that's the operative word, do they earn your trust and respect? Are they credible when they speak? Are they adept at team building, meaning are they optimizing resource potential and putting resources in the right seats for their skill sets and for the work at hand? Are they mentoring? Do they hold their resources accountable? And are they able to identify risk and issues and find mitigation strategies and work them appropriately? Next slide, please. So what are signs of insufficient leadership? Because we have this in organizations all the time. There might be too strong of an emphasis on short time frames and getting the immediate task done. Focusing on detail to the nth degree. Elimination of risk. Strong specialization. Rigid compliance to rules. Rigid control, containment, and predictability. And performance then typically deteriorates over the time. Everything that I just talked about in those bullets actually describes management. Next slide, please. So again, from Scale to Agile, this is actually from SAFe, leading by example. What are the characteristics that SAFe talks about? They talk about authenticity, being present, bringing your true self to the table. We've talked about emotional intelligence. Typically, leaders are on a lifetime journey of learning. That depicts how leaders engage in an ongoing, voluntary, and self-motivated pursuit of knowledge and truth. And here's something else that's important to note. They encourage and support the same in others. They are invested in growing others, meaning that they encourage others to provide they encourage leaders to provide the personal, professional, and technical guidance and resources for each employee's needs to assume increasing levels of responsibilities. Excuse me, so they invest in talent. And they also are very adept and believe in decentralized decision-making. Often in the workplace, I know that when some of my team members have come to me and they're looking for me to engage and be a part of a decision, happy to do it. But with my meeting schedule and other things that I have going on, I don't want to become the backlog. So a leader will empower their team resources and give them the authority to make informed decisions. Next slide, please. So if you want to be a leader, let's look at the word chart, the word puzzle on the right-hand side. You have vision. You are a natural leader and people will follow you. There's a culture that's created. There's a comfort in your role. You take ownership. It's about power, not control, and you assume responsibility probably when it's not even in your purview. So organizationally, companies need leaders who understand the landscape, who can leverage their network. They're socially and politically adept. They have the social and political capital that they have built over time by connecting with people and building relationships. They have that mid to longer term vision. They're not threatened by any of their team members. They will empower and delegate and actually want their resources to assume responsibility and feel empowered. They're typically very action oriented. They motivate, as I mentioned before, they're the cheerleaders of the team and the company. And then again, we go back to that fail fast and recover mindset. So if you want to be a leader, these are the things that you need to be thinking about from an organizational perspective. Next slide, please. Accept people where they are before challenging them to go where they haven't been. So personally, be a strategic thinker. Realize that when your education ends at the end of high school or the end of college or even a master's degree or PhD work, You're a lifelong learner, whether it's formal education or informal education with keeping up with periodicals and what's happening in the industry. Leaders are typically charismatic type people, yet they're approachable, they're team-oriented, and they adapt easily. They want to exploit change. If they see opportunity, they're not going to be afraid of taking a risk. They're going to jump for it with that fail fast and recover quickly and move forward mentality. Okay, next slide, please. So lead, don't be shy. In today's world, we need leaders who think strategically, who can be courageous, who will speak the truth, who will be bold, who will be authentic, be resilient, and adapt. The result will be a stronger individual, a stronger team, a stronger organization, and a stronger, better connected world. Next slide, please. So remember, one man is not an island. The complexity within organizations and teams is not what we see above the water, but it's the iceberg or whatever is below the surface. That's where the gotchas are and what we can't see. And that's where leaders help us with strategic vision and setting expectations to navigate ambiguity and complexity. Next slide, please. Remember, we also all need a tribe. A tribe needs a leader with community to be successful. No man is an island. We need a community of people surrounding us, encouraging us, supporting us, and being our cheerleaders. Next slide, please. So we have 5 generations in the workforce for the first time in history. And in summary, not everyone wants to be a leader or who has the ability to lead. And each of these generations is looking for something different in the workplace, in their leadership, in how they navigate the landscape and operate at work. In a complex, dynamic, and ever-changing environment, we need people who can set strategy and encourage and drive people to achieving a vision, move a team or an organization forward. It is up to us to be there for each generation and to advocate for success. This applies at work. It also applies in the world at large. We want and need our leaders to care, to listen, to achieve, and to keep our environment safe, innovative, creative, fun, and productive for today and for future generations. Next slide, please. Jack Welch, former CEO of General Electric Company, says, an organization's ability to learn and translate that learning into action rapidly is the ultimate competitive advantage. Sam Walton, founder of Walmart and Sam's Club, stated, outstanding leaders go out of the way to boost the self-esteem of their personnel. If people believe in themselves, it's amazing what they can accomplish. Walt Disney, of all the things I've done, the most vital is coordinating those who work with me and aiming their efforts at a certain goal. And Peter Drucker, who is an author and educator, stated, management is doing the right things. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. So project leadership or leadership in general, it may be misunderstood and underutilized, but it is mission critical and vital to the success of any project, any program, any team, and any organizational at whatever level, including the enterprise company level. That concludes my presentation. I just got a new Mac computer and I'm having trouble with the deborahgroup.net email address, so I can be reached at Deborah Herting, allbutittogether@verizon.net. And please feel free to reach out with any questions, any comments. Again, I strive to be a lifelong learner, but I also have done significant coaching and mentoring in my time. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Deb, so much for your time and for presenting with us tonight.
My pleasure. It's always fun to be working with you and your team, Susan.